A synthesis of spiritual paths. Hello, this is Chris speaking, Shores of Infinity, with a video about how to find a true synthesis of spiritual paths. Nowadays, most of us have tried out many things and are still experimenting with paths they heard about, read about, or encountered in another way. And Aurobindo already talked about it in his Synthesis of Yoga, in his introduction in the 2 introductory chapters, the systems of yoga and the synthesis. So no matter if you practice integral yoga, any other kind of yoga, any path, this is valuable information for any path you walk, any path you chose, or any paths. With the example of Hatha Yoga, Raja Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga and Karma Yoga and Tantra, Aurobindo explains how to arrive at a true synthesis. I will not explain here what all these paths are about. There are previous videos about that. The interesting thing is here that he says that it is unlikely that you have enough time to practice all these methods after each other consecutively. Probably your lifetime will be too short to practice all of them after one another and achieve a level of useful mastery with all of them. Nor can you learn or study or practice all of them simultaneously. In most cases, there have been some, like Ramakrishna and Vivekananda, who were able to do this. It was probably part of their destiny, but it's not something that you can expect to be possible. And again, while Aurobindo is talking about traditional Indian methods and ways, I think you can use this for everything in your spiritual life. All of us are trying to achieve a synthesis here. And all of us have probably seen that all paths have advantages and disadvantages, and you can spend a lot of time traipsing around on one path and not getting anywhere because of tradition. Now, as soon as a spiritual path becomes a religious tradition or a moral tradition, it's very hard to find the core of it, to get to the root of it, to the really valuable, juicy bits, and not get lost in dogma and rituals. So what's the way? If one after another is not possible and all of them simultaneously is very unlikely, how to get to a synthesis? Maybe to take part of this and part of that, but no, that is eclectic, that is not a synthesis. If you gather different aspects of different methods and then kind of mix it, which is probably what most of us are doing or have done, me included, then it's an eclectic method and it may be fruitful or it may not be. And most of all, this method contains the danger of remaining superficial. So the solution Aurobindo proposes in his Synthesis of Yoga in the introduction is the following. The first step is to find out what is the essence of each of those methods you want to synthesize, bring together. Maybe some Gurdjieff and some yoga and some Zen Buddhism and some shamanism and some spiral dynamics and some Reiki, some Christian stuff and some UG, and you already have a hodgepodge of all kinds of things that are not really compatible. But if you really find the essence of all of these methods, what are they really about? Then it may be possible. So here Sri Aurobindo explains how he developed his integral yoga, which is a combination of the 5 most well-known yoga styles and the right hand path of Tantra. Yeah? The left hand path of Tantra is more like hedonism. That's what mainly came to the West and is now sold as cuddling and sex workshops. But the right hand part of Tantra is about seeing the universal energy as Shakti, to worship the energy as the force in Satchitananda. A less intellectual approach, but a more hands-on approach. The Prakriti, not only the Purusha. And this is the medium, the vessel, and the glue to hold all the other styles together. He more or less discards Hatha Yoga and Raja Yoga. Because Hatha Yoga, he says, takes too much time and you don't necessarily need it. It's nice, good for the body, all these stretching and meridian and breathing techniques. But for him, he didn't find too much value in it. I disagree a little bit, but for him it was the case, and for most of his followers. I think it's quite valuable to do these exercises so that you can stand all the energy that will flow into you in later stages of higher consciousness. And he also discarded Raja Yoga more or less because he said it was mostly about attaining siddhis, supernatural abilities, which you will get anyway later on. So why waste time? Why waste time to get them now, prematurely, which will probably be an obstacle because it may be an ego boost. So the 3 major yoga styles that he was left with were Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga is more about surrender and devotion, so a little bit similar to the right-hand Tantra path, easy to combine. And Karma Yoga is about selflessness, selfless work. Very good to get rid of ego bondages. And Jnana Yoga is about attaining real knowledge, not this false knowledge that we have been fed up till now, but real knowledge about how the world works and what human beings are, what consciousness is, and what Maya is, and so on. And thus to develop the higher faculties of the mind, not just the lower ones. Plus he discovered that all life is yoga, so all life is about the reunification with the divine. You cannot do anything that is not about the reunification with the divine, that is not about enlightenment. Everything is about it. It's just a matter of how and when you get there. Nature is a manifestation of the divine, and the divine is the source of nature manifest, which we are part of. We and everything we do are part of nature and part of the divine, of the infinite, of the absolute. So to recognize this, to really realize this, is another very important step. That everything in our life is actually spiritual work. No matter if we realize it or not. But it is better, of course, if we do realize it, because then we can follow certain methods that work well for us and abort others which don't work well for us. We have to realize here that everything is part of the divine being, or whatever you want to call it. There's nothing that is not the divine. Everything is divine, like Shivapuri Baba said also. The first step is to realize that everything is God. Although I wouldn't use the word God because it creates religious misunderstandings. He writes, not only the realization of unity in the self, but of unity in the infinite diversity of activities, worlds, and creatures. And therefore, an integral liberation. And here comes the juicy bit now. Not only the liberation, the freedom of the individual being in all its parts with the divine, which is called Sayujya Mukti. And not even only the realization of Satchidananda, which is called Salokya Mukti, but to transform the human being into the divine, which is called Saddharmya Mukti. And thus we have a much bigger goal, not only to transform ourselves as individuals, but to transform the whole human being, the whole human race, the whole human species. And to achieve this, he proposed the combination of jnana, knowledge, love, bhakti, works, karma, and the right-hand Tantra path of surrender, which he called synthetic or integral. And it is integral because it is not confined to the individual. And actually not only to humanity either, but to divinize the normal material life, which is anyway divine, but not knowingly so. So for yourself, for your own path and paths, first step is to find which paths do you choose and what is their essence. And everything that has not been effective and fruitful up to now, just discard it. It's not for you. It's not your path. Second, to see that all life is yoga. All life is spiritual practice, no matter what you do. Thirdly, that everything is the divine. Everything and everyone. Even the vacuum cleaner, which you might hear in the background, which has to vacuum clean right now, although I'm trying to make a video. But so what? There's a slight humming noise in the background. Who cares? And lastly, you combine all of this, the essence of the method or methods you chose, the realization that everything is the divine, the realization that everything is spirituality, and thus also that it is not enough for you as a single person to reach liberation, because it is only a partial liberation. It has to be the liberation of everyone and everything, which in itself is also a liberation. It's a liberation to know that it's not about you only. There's a bigger picture involved here. You are part of it, so accept that you're part of it. You're not alone in this. The widest synthesis, he writes, the widest synthesis of perfection possible to thought is the sole effort entirely worthy of those whose dedicated vision perceives that God dwells concealed in humanity. And this is of course also what yoga means, reunification with God. I've thought about this now for more than 20 years and experimented, and I think you can apply this method of synthesis to all methods that fit. Everyone must walk his or her own path and choose his or her own methods that suit, that fit. So find methods that fit. For me, the integral yoga fits. But still, I chose to incorporate other methods and other paths and viewpoints, like spiral dynamics and like the Hawkins scale and like Daniel Quinn and Eugene and Jed McKenna. And they seem to contradict each other, but they don't if you find the essence. And if you prefer, if you want, you could even incorporate the Quran or the Torah or the Bible, as Sri Yukteswar Giri has demonstrated in his book, The Holy Science. It's all compatible. The trick is to create a synthesis and not just a big mishmash, a big mix, a huge confusion and distraction. Because it can become a distraction to look for more and more and more and more and more. And no, look for what suits you and find the essence. That will be the fastest way. Not the surest way, because the only sure and safe path is towards death. But the fastest way. Thank you to all my Patreons. Thank you for joining me as a Patreon. Thank you for a thumbs up. Hit the bell button, like and subscribe, and sharing the videos with your friends. And see you soon.